Coming up on The World Today, 7 children and 2 adults killed in a school shooting in Russia's Kazan city. More casualties being recorded from the face-off between Palestinian militants and the Israeli military. Plus, Russia responds to allegations it is linked to the Colonial hackers who compromised U.S. cybersecurity of its major pipeline. Well, welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani here in Lagos. So begin with the horrible news about shooting at a school in the city of Kazan in Russia, leaving 7 children and 2 adults dead. 21 other people, mostly children, were wounded in the attack. Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin is sorrowful about the event, and the leader of the Republic of Tatarstan, where the shooting happened, says the attack is a major tragedy. The attack happened at 9:20 a.m. local time today and had students and teachers screaming in panic. Footage shared on social media shows some children jumping from windows to escape, as well as injured people being evacuated. 2 children reportedly died after jumping from a second-floor window. Reports are still sketchy about the gunman. Authorities believe there were 2 of them and that one of them was killed. They've been identified one suspect as Ilnus Galyaviev, a Kazan resident who once studied at the school. The VOA's Charles Main is in Moscow. Charles, how is the news about the shooting being received in the Russian capital, as Russia ever hardly has incidents like this?
That's right. I mean, essentially, I think it's fair to say there's a sense of shock. It's a beautiful spring day here after we just had the May holidays that just finished up. Today was the first day back in school for many of these children. Kids are out, and there's a solemnity out there in the city, certainly in Moscow, and we've seen makeshift memorials cropping up around the country in towns across Russia. Russia isn't entirely averse to school shootings. For example, in Crimea in 2018, there was an even deadlier attack against a local technical college. That saw 21 people killed. But of course, it also brings memories of the attack of Beslan. This was when a siege of a school by Muslim terrorists back in 2004 that saw over 300 children killed ultimately. And we saw also the Kremlin weigh in here today. President Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said the president had ordered a review of gun legislation, essentially looking at ways to prevent certain guns from getting into the hands of the public. And it seems like they're going to move forward with that quite quickly, although some would say obviously too late.
Yeah, indeed, because one of the gunmen we're learning is a registered firearm owner. He had a license for a semi-automatic shotgun. He even posted about the attack on social media. What are authorities saying about how this did not catch anyone's attention before the shooting?
Well, you're seeing this debate that we've seen, frankly, in the United States as the U.S. grapples with all these mass shootings as well. It's rare for Russia, but now they're confronting many of these same questions. First of all, how did this 19-year-old get access to firearms legally? An assault rifle? Who needs an assault rifle if you're 19 years old? And of course, there's also, in theory, to get access to guns here, you need to pass a psychological exam. Clearly, that was ineffective here. The shooter, again, purchased his firearm legally. Also, we've seen debates that, center among mass shootings across the globe, and particularly in the United States in recent years, which is, some people will point to violence and culture, where video games, movies playing some kind of role here. As you note, he posted his intentions on social media. There's questions to the tech industry and how effectively they monitor content so that authorities can act in time and prevent these kind of tragedies. And finally, also just what kind of opportunities are available to young Russian men. This is a 19-year-old in a local college in Kazan. The sense is that he didn't have much of a future for himself, and that might have driven him in some way to commit this act. But we're still learning a lot of details, and we can't rule anything out at this point.
Indeed, so many to look at, especially his mental health. But what more are we learning about the casualties from the shooting, the 21 other people who are still in hospital receiving treatment from wounds which they got from the shooting this morning?
Right. I mean, we know, essentially, we believe that most of the victims here were eighth graders, although the range in the wounded was from 7 years old to 62. One was an employee of the school. There's a story going around about a 25-year-old English teacher named Elvira Ignatova, who was killed trying to shield one of her students. And was posting freely to social media up until the day she died. Seemed like a very, warm and happy person. So I think people are really kind of just in shock again at what's happened to these lives that were snuffed out, obviously too soon. And again, also in terms of the injured, we also know that aside from gunshot wounds, there were some people who were seen jumping from the third or fourth story floor of the school to avoid the shooter. Presumably, they've got some broken bones and some healing to do there as well.
Really sad incident coming out of Russia. Charles, thank you for updating us.
Thank you.
Let's move now to the Middle East, where Israeli military has been involved in heavy exchange with Palestinian militants. The militants have fired more than 300 rockets towards Israel since Monday night, killing 2 Israelis. Israel, on the other hand, has hit 150 targets in response, reportedly killing at least 26 Palestinians. Calls are mounting from the international community for both sides to end the escalation.
Israelis taking cover as Gaza rocket sirens ring aloud, hitting residential buildings. Palestinians fired uninterrupted barrages of rockets into Israel as its military pounded Gaza with airstrikes through the early hours of Tuesday. 6 Israelis were said to be wounded when a rocket hit and partially destroyed a building in the southern city of Ashkelon early on Tuesday.
We heard a boom and a siren. There was a smell of smoke. I went outside. People started going outside. I help people out so they don't step on broken glasses. I just helped people, and then the police came and started working.
Over in Gaza City, Palestinians fleeing after an Israeli strike on a building. The Gaza Health Ministry said 25 Palestinians, including 9 children, had been killed and 108 wounded by Israeli strikes in the destitute enclave since clashes escalated on Monday. In the meantime, there have been appeals for calm after days of unrest in Jerusalem spiraled into retaliatory attacks by Israeli and Palestinian militants in Gaza. The United States, European Union and United Kingdom have urged both sides to lower tensions as soon as possible.
The United States condemns in the strongest terms the barrage of rocket attacks fired into Israel in recent hours. This is an unacceptable escalation. While we urge de-escalation on all sides, we also recognize Israel's legitimate right to defend itself, to defend its people and its territory. It is critical for all sides to ensure calm and de-escalate tensions and avoid violent confrontations.
Since Monday night, militants have fired more than 300 rockets towards Israel, injuring 31 Israelis. Israel says its airstrikes on Gaza have hit 130 targets, with health officials saying 24 Palestinians have been killed. The militant group Hamas, which controls the Palestinian territory, said it was acting to defend Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque from Israeli aggression and terrorism, after the site, which is holy to Muslims and Jews, saw clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians on Monday that left hundreds injured.
We continue to monitor the coronavirus situation across the world, looking more worryingly now at the situation in India, where more bodies are said to have washed up on the banks of the Ganges River north of India. More than 50 bodies have been discovered in Gamma, Uttar Pradesh, over the past few days. At least 40 were pulled from the river, some 55 kilometers downstream from Gamma. No one knows how the bodies got there, but it is thought that they are COVID-19 victims. Their identities are also unknown. Here's a global update.
Faced with soaring cases, India's capital city is under a worrying pressure of drug supply, as pharmacies are not allowed to procure much-needed medicines and hospitals are reporting shortages. As panic sweeps across the city, residents are running to get their hands on two main drugs that have been effective against COVID-19, namely remdesivir and tocilizumab. In desperation, some Indian families have had to delve deep into their savings as medicines on the black market cost as much as 5 times the official price.
We could only get the drugs on the black market. The first day, I bought 1 dose for 28,000 Indian rupees. The next day, I bought 3 more doses, each for 28,000 rupees. Then the third day, I bought 2 more doses for 30,000 rupees.
In Europe, intensive care medical staff exhausted by the battle against COVID-19 have gone on strike in some French hospitals. They are demanding better pay and working conditions. The hard-left CGT trade union says the coronavirus crisis has underlined the need to increase the number of nurses and intensive care beds in public hospitals, as well as improve salary terms.
We're exhausted as being a specialized service. We're the only caregivers able to manage the crisis. Unfortunately, we get no recognition for this. What we want today is to be recognized for this specialization, for this particular treatment.
Meanwhile, protesters gathered outside AstraZeneca's campus in Macclesfield, northwest England on Tuesday, calling on the company to share its coronavirus vaccine technology. Activist group Global Justice Now organized a small rally to coincide with the company's annual general meeting. The protesters want the British-Swedish firm and others that have developed vaccines to openly license their shots and share their technology with the World Health Organization.
Ho ho! Vaccine pains have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Vaccine pains have got to go! Excellent!
AstraZeneca has pledged not to profit from sales of the vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic. Still in Europe, the Danish Science Center Experimentarium has opened the country's first interactive COVID-19 exhibition. The director of the Danish Health Authority, Søren Brostrøm, opened the exhibition with a sneeze in the sneeze simulator. In the exhibition, children and adults can experiment, play, and gain knowledge about COVID-19 and learn about how best to fight the virus both inside and outside our bodies. Visitors can take a 3D dive into the body of a COVID-19 patient and zoom into the spiked coronavirus, Waka virus, before it spreads in your body, or freeze in shock from the spray of a simulated sneeze.
In the meantime, Queen Elizabeth made her first public appearance since bearing Prince Philip, overseeing the official state opening of Parliament. And with the speech delivered by the monarch on behalf of the government, a raft of post-pandemic laws were presented as Prime Minister Boris Johnson promises to tackle inequality and level up the country. The scale of the ceremony was drastically stripped back because of the COVID-19 pandemic, with the Queen wearing a day dress instead of the usual robes and crown. She outlined several bills the government hopes to pass during the next year on everything from job creation and healthcare to stripping back post-Brexit bureaucracy.
My Lord's vaccination program. My government will strengthen and renew democracy and the Constitution. Legislation will be introduced to ensure the integrity of elections, protect freedom of speech, and restore the balance of power between the executive, legislature, and the courts. My ministers will promote the strength and integrity of the Union. Measures will be brought forward to strengthen devolved government in Northern Ireland and address the legacy of the past. Legislation will be introduced to counter hostile activity by foreign states. My ministers will implement the integrated review of security, defence, development and foreign policy. The United Kingdom will host the G7 summit and lead the global effort to secure a robust economic recovery from the pandemic. My ministers will deepen trade ties in the Gulf, Africa, and the Indo-Pacific. My government will continue to provide aid where it has the greatest impact on reducing poverty and alleviating human suffering. My government will uphold human rights and democracy across the world. It will take forward a global effort to get 40 million girls across the world into school.
The U.S. Department of Energy is set to be working directly with Colonial Pipeline to get pipelines back online and operating at full capacity as quickly and safely as possible. Also says President Joe Biden. He was addressing the issue of a cyber attack on the pipeline earlier, adding that the Department of Transportation has issued an emergency order to loosen restrictions on truck drivers in order to allow fuel to be transported by tanker. This comes after the country's biggest gasoline pipeline fell victim to a ransomware cyber attack that Washington blames on a shadowy criminal network called DarkSide. The attack on the Colonial Pipeline between Houston and New Jersey, which provides nearly half the fuel to the U.S. East Coast, is one of the most disruptive digital ransom schemes ever reported. Now, Russia, on the other hand, has rejected allegations by the United States that it had anything to do with the hackers. Earlier today, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov called on Washington to instead improve cybersecurity between the two countries. A top White House national security official on Monday said that the U.S. intelligence community is working to determine whether the hackers of the Colonial Pipeline have ties to the Russian government. Anne Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber, told reporters at the White House that the FBI has been tracking the ransomware group DarkSide since at least October. A news release issued in the name of DarkSide said its goal was to make money and not create problems for society. Our Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, I think we'll begin first off with this group DarkSide that says its goal is just to make money and not create problems. Exactly how does that work?
You know, this is a newer group that the U.S. has identified as potentially dangerous group and that could potentially have some impact on what we believe is a cyber attack on this pipeline. And so there is, much that is happening right now as far as the investigation and really the true understanding of the behind the scenes and why they would actually be doing this type of an attack. But again, there is, lots of intelligence that is leading toward this organization. And as you said, that they are not here to make any harm. I mean, that is not exactly what has been seen from the intelligence community over the last few months and from what they've seen in their past history.
Kind of sounds counterproductive, but how and why is the U.S. tracing Colonial Pipeline cyber attack all the way to Russia when it could have just come from any of the other countries which are not close allies to the United States?
There's been a prior history. Obviously, we know what happened with the elections previously. We have seen Russian meddling within our election system. We've seen from a cybersecurity perspective, there have been several potential attacks and attacks on the U.S.'s cyber area from Russia in the past. And so I think that based off of the intelligence that has been collected now, it's been almost 10 years since we have seen some of the cyber issues related to Russia, that what they've seen thus far is lending to what we've seen in previous history.
Word on the street says the pipeline is unlikely to resume significant operations for several days. How would that impact on U.S. economy and, better still, day-to-day living in the United States?
You're exactly correct. This can have a major impact on day-to-day living. We're already seeing long lines for gasoline in states such as New Jersey. This pipeline pretty much support the East Coast region of the United States. And so not only are we potentially, and we're already seeing some gas stations without gas to be able to fuel cars and other vehicles that people use here, we're also beginning to notice that it could have a dramatic impact on the cost of gas. And as we know, with the economic crises that the U.S. has been under, with the pandemic having an increase in the cost of gas during a period of time where people are just starting to begin to venture out again, could be quite detrimental to the country.
Maria, thanks again. Well, Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison got off to a ministerial statement on the death of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, calling the Duke an authentic man and a genuine friend of Australia. He then formally extended his and the Australian people's condolences to the Queen and the royal family. Prime Minister Morrison's address comes at the first time the Australian House of Representatives has sat since March 25th. Meanwhile, the government has pledged billions in spending to sustain an economic recovery from the COVID-19 slump that it's blizzed. Even the most optimistic projections move that will keep public finances in the red for years to come. While Prime Minister Scott Morrison's Conservative administration has abandoned any pre-pandemic commitments to a budget surplus, a significant boost in tax receipts from mining exports has helped trim the projected deficit for the current fiscal year. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said the budget shortfall will hit a 161 billion Australian dollars in the year ending June 30, a record but much lower than the government's October forecast of 213.7 billion Australian dollars due to significantly improved economic outlook.
Australia's fate could have been so much worse.
And as we end, the backlash over the lack of diversity within the group which hands out the Golden Globes is seen having a wider impact in Hollywood after NBC dropped its broadcast of the annual ceremony and actor Tom Cruise returned his awards. The U.S. television network announced on Monday it would not air the ceremony, one of the biggest Hollywood awards shows in the run-up to the Oscars, organized by the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. The organization has been under close scrutiny following an investigation by the Los Angeles Times, published in February, which showed the group of 87 journalists had no black members. Critics include Netflix, Amazon Studios, Warner Media, and dozens of Hollywood's top publicity companies who said they would no longer work with the HFPA unless it made far-reaching changes. That'll be all on The World Today. Thanks for watching.